This video is about a fictional kingdom. The fictional kingdom I'm referring to is known as Great Britain, who, according to the myth, has existed since 1707, is one unified single country, which at the time in 1707 created this flag, a merger of the Scottish saltire and the English George Cross. But this is a fraudulent state. Everything you know about this state and the official narrative supporting that state is a lie. The actual union into one single United Kingdom never took place. It's fictional. It's fraudulent. Today the flag looks like this because it used to include Ireland with a diagonal red flag. We no longer have Ireland, but the red flag is still there diagonally. This video is the first of two. The second video has the same name, it's just part 2 of 2. This part tells a story why this particular myth happened, but what actually happened as opposed to what they say happened is two different stories. The second video is actually about the repercussions of that on Scotland today. But now we'll begin with this video. So here is the myth. Way back in the 30s, especially in America, doctors told you that smoking was good. They even did advertisements on cinemas, on screens, to back up that tobacco is good for you. But in the 30s, scientists knew that wasn't the case. But because the doctor's story kept coming out, and the doctors were respected, the scientists' view was ignored, at least for 30 years. It's the same situation with Scotland. For decades, in a couple of centuries, we've been fed the lie, the story, that the two countries came together into one single sovereign union. That didn't happen. The trouble we have today in Scotland is that we have the same problem as what the scientists had against the tobacco industry in the last century. We need to beat the official state narrative. The trouble is, the official state narrative has parliamentary statutes, it has judicial reviews, it has a whole range of stuff going back a long time. And the people in the United Kingdom and in Scotland just accept it because that's all they've been told all their life. The true crime is that the cover-up by the UK state is a crime and international law, and it's called the wrongful act of a state, and it is still being committed today, every day, on Scotland. Here is one example of the official narrative taken from the National Library of Scotland. Here it says, with the exception of the legal and religious systems, everything else, including sovereignty, transferred into this new unified state. The important word here is sovereignty. The transfer of the sovereignty of the nation of Scotland to the newly created United Kingdom did not happen because a queen decided she would like it. Had it put into a treaty and got it ratified by 2 parliaments, only an absolute ruler could have done so, and Anne was not an absolute ruler in either England or Scotland, nor in Scotland was a parliament. There had to be a precise and lawful mechanism for transferring national sovereignty to the new kingdom, so allowing the primary purpose of the Treaty of Union to be realised. Each Parliament in 1706 created the Acts of Union. The following year the treaty was signed. As you can see here, it still says the same thing. They'd be united to a kingdom, the name of Great Britain, creating a new flag, as you saw on the very first screen of this video. But what actually was the mechanism to achieve this? This is Dorothy Bain, the Lord Advocate of Scotland, who in 2022 went to the Supreme Court in London to argue the case for Scotland to have the right to hold an independence referendum. She still went by the UK narrative for how the kingdoms came together. She actually clearly states here in her opinion that Scotland ceased to exist and it became part of England and Scotland, and the union was a full political and economic union. That's what she said. But how was this accomplished? Beyond the wording of the 1707 treaty, she did not say, and no one asked. And in any case, why does it matter? It's always been like this, people think. It matters. It matters because the definition of the UK as one kingdom is much more than a bit of context. It's a pivotal to the locus of sovereignty, the focus of sovereignty in the UK, to the constitutional political rights of the Scottish people, and to the legitimacy and authority of the British state in Scotland. To understand this is to understand the scope and the nature of the crime that was and is today being committed against Scotland. It is important to understand what the word kingdom and crown means and the relationship between them. Otherwise, this video may confuse you because you're not used to the meaning of these words other than the piece of jewellery on top of somebody's head. Kingdom is an old word from Anglo-Saxon times. Siningdom is a composite word meaning sinning, king or a ruler, and dom, a judgment or statute. In time the dom part became to mean the area, the land and jurisdiction of the country. A siningdom or kingdom, then, is the area of jurisdiction or the realm of a specific ruler. Crown is based on the Roman word corona and is much more than the headdress, the piece of jewellery. It symbolises not just the head, but what sits above it, over the entire body. It represents a constitutional institution of the crown, wherein lies the sovereignty, authority, legislative, judicial and territorial of the ruler. So the crown is separate from the ruler. The crown is everything in the state, all the authorities and sovereignty of the state, where the kingdom is the jurisdiction of that ruler. So the crown, as an institution, which varies from country to country, can continue while monarchs change, die, abdicate or are replaced. It continues even without a monarch, even with an empty throne. The crown, therefore, is the sovereign jurisdiction of the ruler, and the kingdom is the realm over which the ruler has jurisdiction. And here is what is the most important thing for the official narrative of the Union, because there cannot be one without the other. So going back to the official narrative, if the Scottish Crown was indeed superseded by the UK Crown, meaning one crown and one kingdom, then the constitutional rights, the crown rights of the Scottish people, could no longer apply unconditionally. The old rules for an old crown and kingdom must be replaced by the new. This is what we are conditioned to believe took place. The combined locus of sovereignty in the new single kingdom of Great Britain merged the two constitutions and the two monarchies, the two crowns and the two territories into one kingdom. The Lord Advocate's starting point was to affirm the 1707 treaty as it was written. This is where the Union crumbles, as the wording of the treaty and acts, or the official narrative that Dorothy Bain so confidentially researched, did not in fact take place. Did not in fact take place. So the sovereignty of the Scottish Crown, the Scottish people, was and is territorial, as well as governmental, because a kingdom is the property or jurisdiction territory of a crown. Therefore, the Crown of Scotland owned the Kingdom of Scotland, just as the Crown of England owned the Kingdom of England. But in England, the Crown meant the monarch, while in Scotland it meant the community of the realm, the people. And it's this rock that the new unitary kingdom, as per the official narrative for Great Britain, foundered and crumbled. Feudal theory and practice was based in England and elsewhere on the premise that a kingdom was first and foremost a feudal entity and, in that sense, the property of its king or queen. In Scotland, the feudal system, this situation was radically tempered by the Crown's status as equal and representative of the community of the realm, which vested that ownership in the sovereignty of the people. Indeed, the people could remove the king, and they did so in the 17th century because he would not take the coronation oath. These are the crowns of the two kingdoms and the date they were actually manufactured. What I want to do here is read this out and add some text for context. The new unitary kingdom, as per the treaty, which would have created the single state territory of the Kingdom of Great Britain as envisaged by the treaty, required the creation of a new unitary crown. No territorial union between Scotland and England into a single unit and territory could happen without it. Remember that a crown is the sovereignty, authority and legislative, judicial and territorial area of the ruler. There was two territories, two crowns, and totally two different constitutions. What follows is not intended as an argument against the legitimacy of the UK crown. They can call it what they like. It is not an argument for what should have happened or what could have happened. The argument is to explain what did happen, or more precisely, what did not happen. The authority of Anne, Queen of Scots, to negotiate the Treaty of Union depended on her legitimacy as a monarch and what was conferred on her in her Scottish Oath of Ascension. This oath required by law invested in Anne as Queen of Scots to protect the Scottish crown, preventing her from altering or undermining the crown. The exact words are, "The right and rents with all her privileges of the crown of Scotland I shall keep inviolate, neither shall I transfer nor alienate the same." So she had no power to change Scots' constitution. In 1689, the Oath of Ascension was put into a document called the Claim of Right. So the Claim of Right included this oath, and the Claim of Right, all of it, is integral within the 1707 Treaty of Union. So the treaty itself, wording within the treaty itself, stopped Anne from altering the Scottish crown and the Scottish laws and jurisdictions and territories. It's important to note, because it is stipulated in the Claim of Right Act, that the Oath of Ascension, that I've just mentioned in the previous slide, is not allowed to change. The monarch can't change anything. And the Claim of Right Act is actually a condition of the Union Treaty itself. The Claim of Right Act of Scotland 1689 is fully embedded within the Union Treaty itself. The Oath of Ascension continues to be required by law for any legitimate monarch of Scots. This ensures that no monarch had or has the authority to alter or undermine the Scottish crown, in which are vested the sovereign rights of the people, known as the community of the realm in Scotland. That is why we are certain that Queen Anne had no power to change the institution passed down from Kenneth MacAlpine, the first King of Alba, changed its name later to Scotland, to transfer the Scottish crown by merging it with that of another nation, to alter its character or undermine its right in any way. If the crown of Scotland could not merge with that of England, then the kingdoms of England and Scotland could not merge into a single kingdom. Thus, while a single political and economic state governed by a single unified parliament was and is entirely feasible, what the Treaty of Union envisaged with the merging of kingdoms was simply impossible. So what we have, never mind the treaty that exists, what we have is this. You can't have a treaty if there is no joint and union kingdom. That applies to the wording of the Acts, and there is no voluntary partnership, because the partnership never took place. Here's an image of the Treaty of Union in 1707, and that document says that the two kingdoms of Scotland and England shall upon the 1st of May forever after be united into one kingdom. A single kingdom, as you've heard earlier, comprises a single territory under a single crown. The incorporation of the territory of Scotland into the territory of the newly created United Kingdom of Great Britain should have been automatic. The official narrative says, of course it was automatic, and this is what has been presented to us as constitutional fact, relying on the assertion that what the treaty says is what took place. This is what both the Supreme Court and the Scottish Lord Advocate assumed as given in the hearing of October 22, which I mentioned earlier. It is, however, a legal fiction. In fact, the Treaty of Union, ratified by the Acts of Union, and which is the sole basis of the creation of the UK state, has in actual fact never come into effect. What took place instead was that Scotland was added to the domains of the English Crown, or as the House of Commons Library has it, the English coronation oath was extended to Scotland. The English Crown was renamed the Crown of Great Britain. Later in 1800, styling itself the Crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and finally the Crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But no matter what the name is, or what name has been adopted, it is precisely the same English Crown institution as it has been from 1066. So what happened to the Scottish Crown, along with the sovereignty it vests in the people of Scotland? It still remains in place. Under the Articles of Union, and the subsequent treaty a year later, Scotland did surrender its independence as a sovereign nation. Constitutionally, the ultimate ownership of the territory of Scotland as a sovereign nation is vested in the Crown. The territory is synonymous with the realm of Scotland, while the Crown itself represents the people, the community of the realm. Today, and as it has been for more than 300 years, Scotland's right of sovereignty over its territory, vested in our Crown, are arrogated by its self-appointed overlord, the Crown of England. Nonetheless, though subordinated to that of England, as the Scottish Crown remains in place, so, therefore, does the Scottish Kingdom, its territorial borders, and its territorial rights. As mentioned a few times, Scotland's sovereign right over its territory is vested in the Crown, and its distinct constitutional legal identity in Scotland under Scots law, compared to the Crown in the rest of the United Kingdom. This distinct identity was not affected by the 1603 so-called Union of the Crowns, and has continued since the 1707 Treaty of Union, when Scotland ceased to be an independent country, but continued to be a sovereign territorial nation. So, what is the constitutional reality? The reality is important for the territorial rights of the Anglo-British state, as for its political authority in Scotland. Without a single kingdom, without a single crown, that would create the one kingdom, then there was no territorial union between Scotland and England. Therefore, it continues to be the case that the Crown property rights in Scots law, which are an important part of Scotland's system of land ownership, are also distinct from Crown property rights in the rest of the UK and belong to Scotland as a sovereign territorial territory. So this is where we are today. I'm going to read this because it's very important. The UK state clearly exercises territorial control over Scotland. It does so while Scotland retains its crown, remains a separate kingdom, and continues to be a sovereign territorial nation. The UK state does so by right not of any single treaty and not of the acts of ratification or the Act of Union, but by a unilateral annexation of Scotland by the English Crown. A voluntary merger of two nations into a new and unified state is an entirely different proposition from the seizure of one nation by another, as different as a marriage is from a kidnapping, and its implications for Scotland's rights to self-determination are profound. So here is a summary of part 1 of 2 of the fictional kingdom Fraudulent State. I hope you understand now that there never has been and never will be a single unified crown created for Great Britain, because the constitutions of Scotland and England were so dynamically different, and Queen Anne at the time didn't have the supreme power to actually enact this unification that was promised and stated within England. The 1707 Treaty of Union was never realised, therefore. In fact, England moved very quickly in 1708. Against the wishes of the treaty, it extended the English crown to Scotland. This is what they did to all the colonies in New England at the time, and also in the later centuries over every country that they conquered. But Scotland, although under duress, economic, military, and traitors from within Scotland, did sign the treaty. Scotland is still a sovereign country, however, because there are two crowns on these islands. Its own crown and territory, its own laws, land rights, and judicial system. The UK narrative about a unified state and a voluntary union is a lie. They have never existed. The myth of the voluntary union only started in 1954, when the United Kingdom was trying to protect itself and lose Scotland in the trend to decolonisation across the world. I now want to give a summary in pictures this time to hopefully increase your understanding. Queen Anne signed the oath of ascendancy to be Queen of Scots in 1702, and she held that position until she died in 1714. The official narrative, however, if you look at Wikipedia, encyclopedias, or just do a Google search, it'll tell you that Anne was only Queen of Scotland until 1707. Magically, after the 1707 treaty, just by words of her desire and nothing else, she was suddenly the Queen of Great Britain. But you know that that was impossible. I now want to explain this to build the picture. This is the Royal Coat of Arms of Scotland prior to 1603. This is the coat of arms, the Royal Coat of Arms. This symbolises the sovereignty of the Crown, the realm, the legislature, the jurisdiction, of which the monarch rules. The monarch in the unicorn here, the monarch is anchored to the land because the purpose is to protect the people and the property of the nation, and that's the symbol of the monarch. This unicorn, if you look, is an identical to this one, even the same crown. This is the symbol of the people of Scotland. So the people and the monarch appear equal. But in the written Scots constitution going back to 1310, the people are actually sovereign over the monarch, and the monarch can be removed or censured by the people. The people, through the Convention of the Estates, a body from people from different parts and different walks of life in the kingdom, ran the Parliament under legislative control and therefore ran the country. The king was responsible day to day, but the people guided the Parliament. In 1603, Elizabeth of England died without having any offspring. So after a bit of thought and a bit of duress, they came up and spoke to King James VI of Scotland and said, "Would you like to be King James I of England as well?" This happened in 1603, and this coat of arms you see here is the coat of arms from 1603, and it's exactly legally the same coat of arms used today. However, the narrative changed it, but this is true. So what you have is the Scottish Constitution, the Scottish people, the Scottish monarch in the land. So this represents this. The same physical person in England had full authority. In Scotland you were a citizen, in England you were a subject. The 1603, another myth of the Union, another narrative, says that this was a union of the crowns. It was no such thing. It was simply two totally separate sovereign states that shared a physical human being. One here with his oath to Scotland, King James VI, and here with his oath to England, King James I. So this is the same for Scotland, no change. Up until 1689, the monarch of England had absolute control over the Parliament and the realm. But in 1689, the Parliament deposed the king, who was James II of England, 7th of Scotland, because he tried to bring in the Roman Catholic faith. And they had a coup, and they reduced the power of the monarch and brought it into the Parliament, hence the phrase today, the crown in Parliament. So even here, the monarch lost control. At the same time in Scotland, 1689, when this change happened, we also got rid of the same monarch. The people removed James VII of Scotland, partly because he was going down the Catholic route, but mainly because he had never signed the oath of ascendancy. In 1689 here we had the English Bill of Rights. In 1689 in Scotland we claimed a claim of right, which is the right of the Scottish people in law to run the country. And the oath of ascendancy that any monarch in Scotland has must be within that oath and document. The reason this happened was there could never be another monarch in Scotland after 1714, or as they say 1707, because that would go against the narrative. How can you have a narrative of one kingdom, one sovereign state, one land territory, if in fact part of that land territory had a different monarch? So that had to stop. I've created another slide and simply brought this image here to the left. So, to summarise, in 1707 King of England was in Parliament through the Bill of Rights, and Scotland still exists, and nothing changed in the treaty. In the treaty it said it was a desire to merge the crowns and make one kingdom. But as you know from the legislator and things I've told you, Queen Anne didn't have absolute control in England, nor did she constitutionally have any power to change the situation in Scotland to unify the two kingdoms into one sovereign territory, one sovereign legal entity. So this, therefore, is still the crest if you ignore the narrative. But the narrative continues and the lie continues. It started from 1708 in the English Treason Act, which put the Crown of England over Scotland. They took us over. This is what they say the situation now in 1708, and it is still, according to them, the UK establishment, the GB establishment, the Crown today. You'll notice that they've removed the Scottish Crown, and the Crown of England and the Crown of the state and the Crown at the sovereign level is all the same crown. Scotland lost theirs because apparently, according to the narrative, it was one unified kingdom. So the lie we hear today started in 1708 in the English Treason Act, put across Scotland, put the Crown across Scotland, and forced the Bill of Rights onto Scotland, and then started colonial control. There started suppression of people, genocide, war, military takeover, expulsion of millions of our people, destruction of our languages, and even today all the things of state, all the departments of state in Scotland are administered and run by England. There's no Scots at the top anywhere. I am busy reading a novel at the moment that tells the history of a kingdom as part of the fiction, and in that they discover this. They discover that in their 600-year history, 400 years ago, one generation changed the truth. They lied to themselves. They hid the past. The next generation withheld that, and as time went past, the text of their history grew, and the lie becomes the true history of the country. This is indeed what has and is happening to the myth of the United Kingdom. Please now, when you have time, watch the follow-up video, Fictional Kingdom Fraudulent State, Part 2 of 2. It follows on from the statement that these events stated within this video had a profound effect on Scotland. The second video is about this. I'd like also to say here, lots of the words and the nuances of crown and kingdom are new to most people. What I recommend you do is start the video again, remove my voice, mute the sound, and with the slider just read the text. Not the additional text that I have, just read the text and I'm sure it'll come clear to you. In April 24, I made a list of historical videos I wanted to create to correct the myth of union and clarify under different headings the true situation we are in today. If you go to YouTube and key in these words exactly, you'll actually find the video you're looking for. This video is this one here, released at the same time of part 2. This video, as you know, explains the lie and that the unified country of the United Kingdom does not exist. The treaty is a lie and a myth. This one looks forward to the effect that the discovery of this myth and the clarification of Scotland as a colony will have on Scotland going forward. I hope you found this talk enlightening and interesting. Thank you.